In introducing our next inductee, I first have to tell a story involving another of our honorees. It was almost 30 years ago when I was still a teenager that I first met Joe Brady. One day, Joe and I were discussing something that had happened several years earlier when he and Bobby Santos had entered one of Plainville Stadium's great open competition modified shows. Joe Brady knew that I had grown up going to Plainville, and he was laughing about how the crowd was really tough on outsiders. I remembered that night pretty well. Santos had finished second, which at Plainville was an excellent showing for an outsider. And Brady said, quote, "As we were pulling out of the pits to go home, I saw this young kid standing there, and I thought he was going to wave at us as we drove by. But then this little so-and-so, only Joe didn't use the word so-and-so, this little so-and-so bent down and picked up this big rock and threw it right at our ramp truck. And it only fell short by that much." And I looked at Brady and said, "Yeah, well, if I'd been just a little older, a little bigger, and a little stronger, I'd have hit that truck." The truth is that that kid wasn't me, but I know how he felt. My whole world in those days revolved around Plainville. And although I loved it when the outsiders showed up, Flemke, Wyckoff, Glazier, Bouchard, Fiandaca, I also loved it when the local boys defended their home turf, which was my home turf. Which brings us back to our inductee. Dave Alkas won the feature that night, beating Santos and thus upholding the local honor. No surprise, because in that period, the early 70s, Alkas won everything at Plainville. 50-lap weekly show, Wednesday night 100-lapper, it didn't matter. Alkas, aboard Roland Sears 54, at first a coupe and later a Vega, was going to be the guy to beat. At his peak, Alkas won 5 track championships in a 6-year span and dozens of features in his long career. No one who watched him will ever forget how he did it. Arms straight out, sawing at the wheel, slashing through traffic from the 7th or 8th row all the way to the front. Plainville was a flat quarter mile, and its cars always seemed to be about 3 years behind the latest modified technology. Not even the best Plainville ride was what you'd call nimble. You didn't finesse your way from 16th to 1st at that place, you muscled it. Dave Alkas, built like a human bulldog, all 4 arms and no neck, was the right man for the job. My pal Bruce Cohen jokes that the lineups at Plainville read like an Italian menu. Membrino, Mordino, Mordenti, Bergenti, Gololo, Spazzano. But the fact is, there were some serious race drivers at that place. From Jimmy Cash to Bob Viveri, from Elton Hill to Donnie Moon, from Ronnie Vaness to Dave's brother Fred Alkas, plus a couple of scrappy kids named Stan Greger and Reggie Ruggiero. Plainville was crawling with hard-nosed characters. When things were going good, they knew how to pass. When things weren't going good, they knew how to keep from being passed. And when things went really wrong, they knew how to fight. They didn't hand pit passes to wimps at Plainville Stadium, and Mr. Alkas might have been the toughest guy at a very tough joint. I asked car owner Roland Sear, an ex-driver himself, what made Dave Alkas so good, and the answer came quickly. Quote, "He was aggressive. If there was a hole that opened just for a split second, Davey would go for it every time," unquote. Of course, Roland didn't exactly discourage Dave's enthusiasm. He remembers telling Alkas, quote, "If you don't expect to ever bend it, don't bother driving it." Now, who wouldn't love a car owner like that? The other day I looked through one of Dave's scrapbooks, and the bold print on the newspaper clippings inside took me back in time. Alkas wins opener at Stadium. Alkas captures Plainville 200. Alkas sweeps Twin 50s. And this simple headline appearing over and over and over, Alkas wins again. There were some interesting photos too, including one from the day in 1966 when Dave, aboard his own coupe, finished second to Billy Greco at the Eastern States Fairgrounds, and a shot of Dickie Benson's number 94 Pinto, which carried Alkas to a mid-1970s Monadnock Speedway victory over the likes of Punky Karen, Pete Fiandaca, and Dynamite Ali Silva. Clearly, Alkas had the stuff to run up front anywhere, but he stuck mostly to Plainville. See, in those days, Plainville's engine rules limited everybody to a slightly puffed up 327. So hauling to high-speed tracks like Thompson and Stafford was a waste of time. Besides, Alkas was a working guy, serving as a field mechanic for some 40 years for the H.O. Penn Company in his native Berlin, Connecticut. Skipping a day's work to run someplace like Albany, Saratoga never mind skipping several days or a week to compete at Trenton or Martinsville, was out of the question. And so Dave Alkas remained a Saturday night hero, which to me is a sacred description. The biggest modified headlines in the high-flying 60s and 70s went to drivers who traveled more, raced 4 nights a week, and won NASCAR championships. Charland, McTavish, Hamilton, DeCero, Stevens, Evans. Those guys deserved all their glory, no doubt about that. But if they were the bricks in the foundation for institutions like this Hall of Fame, then Saturday night heroes like Dave Alkas were the mortar. So Dave, thank you. Thank you for all those wonderful summer nights and all those amazing come-from-behind victories. Thank you for being the kind of reliable, year-in and year-out hero that every Saturday night track needs. Coincidentally, and he doesn't know this man won the first stock car race I ever saw. So for me, it's a huge personal honor to introduce the newest member of the New England Auto Racers Hall of Fame, Mr. Dave Alkas.
Well, of course, everybody that knows me, I'm really tongue-tied most of the time, and I don't take much time up. So plan on being here for about a half an hour or so. No, I won't do that to you. First, I'd love to thank Bones for the induction. I mean, he's a wonderful job. Couldn't do it any better myself, except adding a few other things to it. I got to mention Ronnie Carlson. He brought a replica of the car out here first, so I don't forget. And Ronnie's done a lot of work in building that replica car, which he shows throughout the New England. Very nice job, and I have to give him a lot of thanks for bringing that car up here today. You put it on display. So I thank Ronnie. Also, Plainville really wasn't that bad, you know. We could, I'm going to introduce you to my family. And back when I raced at Plainville, like Dave and the rest of them, hard shoes to fill, but I met my wife over there, believe it or not. So it couldn't have been that wild. She's a very calm girl. Paula, my wife, was a little girl, a freckle-faced girl, came with Ronnie Mayer. And Ronnie himself had his girlfriend, and they both went, his girlfriend and my wife went to Newington High School. And of course she came, they brought her, drag her along with him, and he would root for Ronnie. And my wife would come down the pits and say, Jesus, you know, Ronnie, can you introduce me to this driver? Can you introduce me? So I saw this freckle-faced little girl. Of course, to begin with, I was a farmer. And farmers, they called me Farmer Brown when I first started racing over there. And so we were from the bottom all the way up. So my wife was kind of timid and all, and so we got to know each other, which we've been married for 39 years and very happy. I met her, I would say 43, 44 years ago. So I've got to say, Plainville wasn't that bad, really. Not to me, anyways. Secondly, I've got to introduce my family. Here I got my sister Irene and her husband Donald. I got to say, I got, of course, my younger brother Fred and his wife Kathy, and the younger generation, the younger Fred Jr. and his newly wife, and a neighbor of mine, Tom Wheeler, Pat. And I've got to continue on thanking Roland Sear and his wife Pat. I mean, of course, he didn't have to worry at that time. I used to bring the car home, as rough as we were, pretty much in one piece. And if I didn't, Roland always would work midnight candles to get that car going. Sometimes open shows on Wednesday, we'd get bent up a little bit. We never missed a race. That fellow worked day and night. And I don't know how Pat put up with him. And he would always come back, and maybe it was the winning that made him come back all the time. But for Roland being a car owner for me and keeping the wheels under me was quite a privilege. Of course, we had Dickie Benson, which Dick is over here. The car I drove was a 94, which was one that only 2 people drove. Gene Bergen drove that first. It was the original 2X, or one of the 2X Pintos that Bobby Judkins put together. And I felt thrilled to actually be able to drive that car. And Ed Flemke was in it also, Ed Flemke Sr. Trying to think of everything, and I've got to say, we had, on the way up here, I had an experience that started to give me a flashback of eastern states. This is many, many years ago, and I want to say 20 years or so. We were coming up through Cromwell, Route 91. We're going along about 71 miles an hour coming up. I happened to glance to the left. I looked, and I said, this marker number looks awful familiar. It said Mod 43 on it. Mod 43, that's Billy Greco. So I says to my wife, well, we've got to duplicate what we did up eastern states. I'm going to slide alongside of him on the right-hand side because I come in second to him and I says, I don't want to pass him. And so we pulled up alongside of Billy, give him a wave. I don't know if he remembered it or not. And his co-pilot kind of gave me a wave. And I says to my wife, I got to tell this to the people here, you know. But folks over here, I really, really appreciated the whole organization of NEAR, new and old inductees. And I really appreciate this award. And also, don't want to forget all my friends. I am also now in the Berlin Lions Club, which my wife and I and the Lions members have diligently put a museum together. Beautiful museum, big building, 60 feet wide and 120 feet long. It's in from the fast mode to the slow mode. Right now we're in tractors. Right? I'm preserving the agricultural heritage of Berlin. Got 42 tractors in there. If you guys ever get a chance to come down, please, it's free. You're more than welcome. It's a state-of-the-art museum, and we're building it constantly. We're constantly adding to it. Also, I want to thank all my Berlin Lions members who come down here. There's 20 or so fold over here with 2 tables that came down. And also, I want to mention my good buddy, back when we first started out, Ronnie Wyckoff. I know Bones had also, he mentioned it, and I says, I remember we called him Smiley back then, and he had a few other names that I can't mention. But Ronnie came up from Hialeah, Florida, back in '59, and him and Janice, one of his several wives, but came up from, I'm only joking, came up from Florida, and that no-neck joke, that came from him. I've been wearing that albatross a long time. So with that, I say thanks everybody. I hope I didn't miss anybody.